And what happened that made me so obsessed with them is that when I was 5 years old, I was taken to see my very first movie in theaters, which was Disney's The Little Mermaid. Oh, I know, right? It's such a good movie. I loved it. I was so enchanted with this movie. Like, you could not get me near a sink without me breaking into song. I'm a mermaid. Well, my grandmother learned that I was so in love with this movie, and being the kind, loving grandma that she is, she gave me a little book of fairy tales. The first story in that book was The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen.
Uh-oh. Yep. That's not a good one.
Yes. Yes, the people who are laughing have also read this version of the story. It turns out the original story of The Little Mermaid is nothing at all like the Disney movie. Spoiler alert, the prince marries someone else and the mermaid dies. It's really, really sad. So I was like, thanks, Grandma. But after I got over it, it also made me really curious to know, okay, what else is Disney not telling me? Clearly, there's more to these stories. And that started a fascination that continues to this very day. On top of that, I think that they are very cool stories on a cultural front. And while I do love Disney movies, I don't think that we should let these old stories fade completely into oblivion. Which is why I like to take this opportunity to tell you all one of the original Grimm stories. And I'll give you an option. We're not going to do Little Red Riding Hood because there might be young people in the audience. But I will give you the option. I can tell either Cinderella, which is the slightly gorier version of the two stories, or I can tell Rapunzel, which is the funnier / sweeter story of the two. So, who wants to hear Cinderella? Rapunzel. Okay, Rapunzel. Rapunzel's been popular, I assume, because I wrote a Rapunzel book. Okay, let me get some more water. Once upon a time, there lived a poor man and his wife. And after many, many years of longing to have a child, one day they discovered that the wife was pregnant. And as many pregnant women do, she began to have the most intense food cravings. In particular, she was dying for this particular kind of salad green called Rapunzel. Well, it just so happened that the only place where Rapunzel grew in their small town happened to be in the witch's garden. So one day, the husband climbed over the wall into the witch's garden, and he gathered up as much Rapunzel as he could, and he was just about to make his escape when the witch caught him. And the witch said, "I will let you take this Rapunzel back to your pregnant wife, if, when she gives birth, you give the child to me." And naturally, he laughed and said, "That is the worst deal I have ever heard in my entire life. Who would trade their unborn child for a sack of lettuce?" And the witch said, "Or I could just kill you." And he said, "Okay, you can have the kid." So he takes the Rapunzel back to his wife, and she has the most delicious salad she has ever eaten. And a little while later, she gives birth to a beautiful baby girl. They give the child to the witch, who names her Rapunzel after the salad, and decides to raise her as her own daughter. Well, things are going pretty well. The witch loves Rapunzel very, very much. However, as Rapunzel gets older, she also becomes more and more beautiful. And it occurs to the witch that if this is going to continue, one day, one of those vile men creatures is going to want to take her Rapunzel away from her. And she couldn't let that happen. So the witch does what any practical mother would do. She has a tower built in the middle of the forest, and that tower has no doors and no stairs, and she sticks Rapunzel up in the top. And when she wants to visit, she comes to the base of the tower and she sings, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, that I might climb the golden stair." And Rapunzel lets down her long flowing locks of hair, and the witch climbs up. So it comes to pass that one day, a prince happens to be meandering aimlessly through the forest. If you read very many fairy tales, you might know this is pretty much what princes do. And as the prince is wandering, what should he overhear but the most beautiful singing? And he follows the sound to a base of a tower, but he can't find any way to get up. So he decides to hide behind some bushes and wait. And eventually, the witch shows up, and she sings the song, and Rapunzel lets down her hair, and they visit for a while, and the witch goes home. Then the prince too comes out, and he too sings up the song, and Rapunzel lets down her hair, and the prince climbs up, and they meet, and they instantly fall in love. So the prince continues to come back visiting Rapunzel whenever he can. Some of you might be wondering, why doesn't he bring a ladder? I don't have a good answer. He should have brought a ladder. But he doesn't think of it. So, one day, a few months later, as the witch is visiting her dear, sweet, innocent Rapunzel, she notices something strange. It seems that Rapunzel is growing larger, because Rapunzel is with child. And it occurs to the witch that that means she's being visited by one of those vile men creatures. Because that's how that happens. And she becomes furious. And the witch screams, "I thought that I had kept you from the whole world, and still you managed to betray me." And she cuts off Rapunzel's hair, and she casts her out into a great desert. And then she waits. And eventually the prince shows up, and he sings the song, and the witch lets down Rapunzel's hair, and the prince climbs up. But of course, it's the witch waiting for him at the top of the tower. And the witch says, "You are one of those vile, wicked men, and you will never see your Rapunzel again." She pushes the prince out of the top of the tower, and he falls down into the bramble bushes that have grown around the tower's base, and two of the thorns jab out his eyes. Which did not happen in Tangled. And the poor prince is left as a poor blind beggar to wander through the wilderness. And he wanders for many years, until one day, what should he overhear but the most beautiful singing? And he follows the sound to where Rapunzel is singing a lullaby to the twins that she has since given birth to. And Rapunzel sees the blind beggar, and she immediately recognizes him as the prince that she had so dearly loved. And she falls over him, and she begins to weep. Two of Rapunzel's tears fall into the prince's eyes, and he is magically healed. You guys laugh. It's a fairy tale. And the prince puts Rapunzel and their children up on a horse. I don't know where they got the horse. And he takes them back to his kingdom, where they are all warmly welcomed, and the prince and Rapunzel are wed, and they all live happily ever after. The end.